Hello, 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 critical thinkers. Good evening. I am Fred Feliciano. Welcome to the live stream tonight. I am exhausted, but I'm here. I'm here to give you some great information. I'm here to improve your managerial skills, get you more confident, giving you some strategies that you may not have heard before. So, part of my tiredness is, being a husband, being a father. Being a manager is very similar to having kids. People tell you about uh, what it means to be a parent, what it means to be a father, the work that you put into it, the very difficult challenges that you have, dealing with temper tantrums, dealing with attitude. For those of you who have children, maybe you can empathize with that. So, this is very similar to managing people. Managing people is a skill. It's not something that, well, in some cases, some people are born with the skill of leading others. They're born with the skill of being able to show empathy, being able to lead people, being able to deliver tough conversations, tough messages. Very similar to having children. The children need guidance, they need direction, they need clear expectations. They have to understand boundaries, they have to understand limitations. And that's the basis of any good relationship, whether it be a romantic relationship, whether it be a family relationship. People need to know what those boundaries are, what those limitations are. And the best relationships operate within the freedom of having those boundaries, the freedom of having those limitations and knowing the rules. So that's key. So today I'm going to be going over with everyone. By the way, this live stream is 1,000% for managers. If you're a supervisor of people, if you manage a department, whether it be one person, whether it be 30 people, I'm going to be giving you strategies on dealing with difficult employees or challenging employees. So I have a little PowerPoint presentation for you. I hope you enjoy it. For anyone who wants to ask a question, you can feel free to ask a question. You can put your question in the chat, and maybe in about 15 minutes, I will post a link where you can chat live with me, and you can tell me your situation, and I can help you and give you guidance through that. So let's go ahead and I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay, here we go. Handling difficult and challenging employees. So the first thing I have to do is give you guys a disclaimer, which is this stream in no way constitutes legal advice. I am not an attorney. I did not go to school to be an attorney. I'm giving human resources information. A lot of what HR gets involved in is legal related in terms of dealing with harassment complaints, dealing with employee relations, and in some cases, you have HR personnel who deal with employees who are part of a collective bargaining agreement. That's a very different animal. But for the most part, if you're dealing with a collective bargaining agreement, you have to operate within the confines of that collective bargaining agreement. Also, I'm going to be giving you general information, but this varies from state to state. Like, for example, if you're terminating and if you're terminating an employee, some states have specific rules in terms of what you need to give the employee, whether you need to give them anything in writing. For example, in New Jersey, you have to give an employee a notice of unemployment that they can take. It has information about where and how they can file for unemployment. That's a state requirement. Every state is different. So be sure to make reference to your state-specific laws when dealing with employees. And when in doubt, always reach out to an employment or labor attorney with any specific questions in your area. So this presentation tonight is divided up into two categories. The first is a category that I call be proactive. And then the second category is being responsive. So, I kind of think of it in terms of most doctors, when they treat someone that goes to their office, they are treating symptoms and not necessarily the underlying causes of sickness. That's very big in that's very big in this society, that we don't deal with what's causing what's causing these symptoms, what's causing illness. We deal with the symptoms. We put a band-aid on it. And in the managerial world, there are so many band-aids that managers use to deal with their employees. I believe in being proactive. I believe in before you have these problems in your department with your employees, there are steps that you can take to be proactive so that you don't encounter these problems. So this first section pertains to being proactive and setting up some systems and structures in place so that you have less problematic employees. But nonetheless, you will always have problems. I will go into being responsive versus being reactive. But for the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, we will be focusing on being proactive. Okay, here are some proactive measures that you as a manager can take. One common problem with employees and managers, sometimes it's very not having a clear set of expectations that or duties and responsibilities that the employee has to fulfill. So I always recommend that you have a job description for every role in your organization. And that job description should be updated on an annual basis. Now, these days with artificial intelligence, Chat GPT, you can have a job description generated for you very easily. The problem with that is these job descriptions are very generic, and they should be the foundation only, meaning that's the skeleton that you work with to put together a job description, but there's more things that you have to do to make it be more accurate, right? So it can't be your final prototype. Excuse me. Also, the job description needs to be realistic versus fantasy. And how you can help with that is by having anyone who's currently in the role or anyone who has been in the role take a look at that job description, critique it, give feedback, have someone who's been in the role give a list of everything that they do. And something that's very important that can save you some headache and some trouble is that job description should have a percentage of what the person is doing based on different categories. For example, if I was hiring, let's say, a recruitment coordinator, and two aspects of their role. One aspect is direct sourcing, recruitment, placing ads, sourcing candidates, going on LinkedIn, interviewing candidates. Let's say that's one bucket. And the second bucket is having this recruitment coordinator do some onboarding. Okay. I want to be honest with the job description and mention that 80% of the role is recruitment, it's sourcing, it's going on LinkedIn, it's posting ads, it's going through resumes, and 20% is onboarding. Because you may have some people who would rather have a role that's 100% onboarding, or 50-50, 50% onboarding, 50% other recruiting responsibilities. So having the accurate percentage of what the person will be doing, I find that very important. So that's one thing you want to have in that job description. It's a proactive measure to avoid problems that come out in the future with people not being happy with their role. So I also want to talk about this thing that all managers and all HR professionals put on job descriptions, this and other duties as assigned. So that's a big one. Other duties as assigned. Yes, 9 times out of 10, human resources, organizations, for-profits, nonprofits, anything in the middle can have a job description and can have that and can assign the employee um, can assign the employee additional responsibilities, and the employee doesn't have to necessarily approve of those responsibilities. That's not great employee relations. Typically, you want to have buy-in from employees, but yeah, it is an organization's, um, you know, basically an organization has the power to add additional responsibilities and other duties to a job description. But as the employer, as a manager, you want to be careful not to take advantage of it. You want to be careful not to abuse it, and you want to attempt to get buy-in from the employee, so that they can accurately, or in good fashion, do their job and feel like they're not being taken advantage of. So some level of buy-in with adding additional responsibilities. This is why we have the other duties as assigned. Um, that's important, and that should always be on the job description. And that job description needs to be signed by the employee upon hire, and it should be reviewed on an annual basis. That's just good practice, good HR practice. So, in terms of other proactive measures, I want to speak to you about supervision. And this is an issue that is always a problem in every single organization I've worked for. And it's a problem with my colleagues, with the managers that they oversee, managers not consistently meeting with their employees. And this is one way that you can avoid a crap load of problems, by having regular supervision with your employees. A couple of notes about this. One, hopefully you have a consistent day and time for this. Now, it doesn't mean things, may not change, of course. That's the real world. You may need to modify it. 1 month, let's say your goal is to meet with your employee every 2 weeks, or maybe it's weekly. Things come up. That's all great and dandy. But when you have a pattern of managers missing supervisions with their employees, it sends a signal or a message that you don't care as a manager, and you're not invested in their development, regardless of how high functioning the person is. Now, you have some roles where, let's say, you'll have a CEO supervising a, let's say they're supervising a chief financial officer. They're supervising someone who does, business development or does sales, and they're very autonomous. In that respect, that supervision schedule might be maybe once a month, as long as that monthly meeting you hit the goals hard. You have a set a set list of agenda items, then that's great. For those supervision meetings, on that agenda, there should be a couple of bullet points about: one, conflicts and crisis, checking in to see if there's anything that you as a manager need to be aware of, if there's anything percolating. Me, myself, and my practice has always been, if I felt something was going south with anyone in any organization I worked for, to give my manager a heads up. Hey, I don't want you to do anything about this, but just FYI, I'm experiencing this. That kind of item should be on your agenda. An agenda item that addresses conflict and addresses crisis. And if there is no crisis, if there is no conflict, then great, so be it. You check that off, you move on to the next agenda item. Also, a part of that proactive measure of supervising people and having an agenda is discussing the culture of the organization and how people get things done in your organization. Organizations can be very different. Some organizations are very, you know, web-based meetings, virtual. Others are, you know, face-to-face. Now you have many employers that are forcing, and they have their employees kicking and screaming to come back to the office because they want that face-to-face interaction and they want that collaboration. I don't have a strong opinion on either. I think whoever is the CEO sets the tone, sets the culture of the organization. But I do think it can be hypocritical if the culture of the organization is to be face to face, but your CEO is working from home 4 days a week. I think that might be a little bit hypocritical, but there might be a business need for your CEO to be out of the office 4 days out of the week. So to each his own. You have to take this on a case by case basis. Excuse me. But going back to the agenda item, it's really about having an agenda item that speaks about the culture of the organization, how to get things done, and every department or every person, every stakeholder might be nuanced. You know, for example, some people, you know, you cannot send an email to because they won't answer it. Some people just don't answer emails, and in some cases, it's acceptable. So you may want to talk to your employee about, hey, you have to take ownership and you have to pick up the phone and call this person, text them, get their cell phone, so on and so forth. Okay. So more proactive items or measures that a manager can take is to focus on onboarding. Now, onboarding is the opportunity for you or your HR department to go over policies, procedures, and there are certain key policies and procedures that every employee should be gone over within their first couple of weeks of being hired. One is a code of conduct. Employees need to understand what is permissible in the office in terms of conduct, what's unacceptable in terms of offenses, what offenses are ones that would warrant termination, so that the employee knows these types of behavior won't be tolerated. Additionally, all organizations, regardless of your size, need to have, I call it a freedom from harassment policy, AKA sexual harassment policy. But it's not just sexual harassment, it's harassment from all forms of discrimination, protected classes. That has to be included in your onboarding. That has to be included in your employee manual. You know. Also, another key thing to discuss that comes up always: latenesses, absenteeism. Discuss with your employees upfront the policy on that. Discuss with them how you want the employee to call out. What's the threshold? For example, if I've supervised people where I said, you know, if you're going to be 5 or 10 minutes late, don't call me. I don't need to be notified that you're 5 to 10 minutes late. But if you're, let's say, 15 to 20 minutes late, the practice is for you to notify me that you are going to be late. So you want to talk to your employee about the practice in terms of these policies and procedures, what's acceptable and what's expected of them. So I addressed this previously with the first proactive measure, but the culture and values, every organization, I don't care if you're a one-person shop or you have 3,000 employees or 20,000, I, per se, small consulting firm, you know, I have a core set of values. It's on my website for anyone who wants to see it. But it's important for employees to have an understanding of what you value as an organization, because it drives how you get things done. Also, conflicts. I spoke about that before. As an organization, as a culture, there has to be norms about how people deal with conflict in your office. I've worked in some organizations where yelling was accepted, and some high level people yelled and communicated in that fashion. I've worked in places where you just did not do that, and yelling and name calling and cursing and profanity, sucking at the teeth was just not accepted, not permissible. Give me a second. So, the second part of my presentation is about being responsive. So we spoke about being proactive. This is about being responsive when you do have situations where you do need to address individuals. So responsive is different from being reactive. Reactive, for me, sounds impulsive. It sounds like somebody is pushing your button. And being responsive takes thought. It takes a level of patience, and it takes strategy, and it takes really thinking about how you deal with situations. So this is why I call this being responsive versus being reactive, because you don't want to be reactive. Going back to the medical analogy, people are reactive when it comes to their health. They see the doctor when something is falling off or they're excessively bleeding in an area instead of dealing with situations outright and early. I'm a big believer in, get your annual physical. Uh, Big believer in that. Get your blood work done. That's being responsive. That's being proactive, so that when you are aware of situations, you can respond and you have the appropriate timing to respond. So the first aspect of of being responsive is you kill monsters when they're babies. Okay. You kill the monster when it's a baby, because and what I mean by this is you address conflicts and problems early on. Now, when I talk about monsters being babies, how that translates to the managerial world is this. When you're dealing with your employees, do you have an issue with your employee that makes you lose sleep? Okay. Excuse me. Does it make you lose sleep? Is this something that you complain about to your spouse, to your significant other, to a family member, to a good friend? If you're out in a pub or a bar, are you talking about this employee and you're not doing anything about it yet? Okay. Does it bring forth this employee issue any negative emotions in you? Do you get upset? Do you make comments like, I don't understand why this person is doing this? That's typically not a good sign. Okay. And then also think about what this person is doing. Is this something that other members of your team, they don't engage in this, and they would not even consider engaging in it? Okay. So you take a look at this behavior, you compare it to your team, and is this outside of the norms that you have set for your team? So these are some of the signs that you may need to address this monster and kill this monster while it's still a baby. So, also in terms of yourself, because I truly believe that managing people is a skill, but it's definitely a skill that people can learn. Okay. And you know that you need assistance when this kind of work makes you feel uncomfortable. And when a lot of people feel uncomfortable, they avoid it. I learned very early on back in my social work days that there's two ways of dealing with stress. Is you either avoid it or you deal with it head on. Now, not dealing with these problems, not killing monsters when they're babies, to put this nicely, it's a weakness. And it's something that if you're not killing these monsters while they're babies, it's something that you need improvement in. So I'm going to ask everyone out there that if you have a monster, a baby monster in your lurks, in your office, in your organization, and you're feeling this negativity toward them, there's clear-cut issues. I want you to challenge yourself and begin to address those issues. Maybe maybe you need support. Maybe you need to have a conversation with your boss, or maybe a conversation with HR to get you over that hump. So, not killing monsters when they're a baby hurts your career. It's something that might be tolerated from the leadership in your organization, but understand this: deep down, leadership knows when you're a weak manager. They know when you have the inability to deal with conflicts head on, or you have an inability to deal with these crisis situations. You don't want to be known as an individual that cannot deal with these conflicts. Ultimately, you are not going to grow in your career. You are not going to grow in that organization, most likely. They might be keeping you on because they're having a hard time finding someone. But ultimately, a healthy organization with a good culture is not going to hold on to a manager that does not address their conflicts in their departments. It's just not going to happen. Also, you don't want to be seen as someone that is kicking the can down the road. So you hope this situation goes away with this employee. You hope that maybe they resign. You hope that maybe this just improves on its own, but you don't want to be seen as the person that kicks the can down the road. We see this in politics. We see this with cities that don't want to take care of the cancers in their cities, and instead they want to tax people, and they want to generate more income, more revenue, instead of eliminating the problems that they have in their cities. So you want to be responsive. You don't want to kick the can down the road. You want to kill the monster when it's a baby. You don't want to kill it. You want to kill it, but you want to kill it when it's a baby so that it doesn't get worse. Okay? What I'm going to do now, very quickly, give me a second. I'm going to put a link in the chat for anyone who wants to come on. And if you want to communicate, share your story, if you have any questions, you can feel free to click that link, and we can discuss. So I'm going to continue on with the presentation, and then I'll take any questions or anyone who wants to come on. So another responsive measure is take ownership of performance conversations. You and you alone as the manager, you have the duty and the responsibility to set these conversations, to manage these conversations, and execute these conversations. You have to have an understanding of your role in leading conversations. Employees don't take ownership of their correction. The manager does. It's just like with children. I have 2 children, and constantly I have to correct my kids. They don't correct themselves. So therefore I need to take the time out. And if I'm angry, I take a deep breath. I pull away. I pull my child aside. I might kneel down, get eye to eye level, and have a conversation in a way that they understand that's firm yet loving. So imagine a carpenter coming into your home and doing plumbing. That's the equivalent of your employee taking ownership of, having this performance conversation. It's your role as the manager to facilitate these conversations. So most of your employees, some of them, not most of them, you may have a handful that have a PhD in left-handed puppetry. I actually stole this term from Dave Ramsey, but what I mean by this in this context is that your employees are pulling the strings. They're pulling your strings. Many know how to manipulate you. Many know how to push your buttons. And this is one thing you don't want. You do not want your employees being the puppet master and dictating how conversations go. Conversations, yeah, could be collaborative, but typically there's a facilitator, especially when you're doing a performance conversation. I mentioned having strings pulled, and many employees know how to push buttons. So you have to be aware of that, of your employees knowing how to push your buttons. So taking ownership of the performance conversation involves having a game plan. I actually have a managerial online training. I'll give you a little glimpse of that later. But there's a section that I call fact finding, right? All fact finding means is basically doing preparation to have a performance conversation, managing your emotions, understanding the obstacles that the employee may have. But in your game plan, you must do preparation to have these conversations. I would not just have an issue with an employee and then jump into, hey, just come into my office. There needs to be some prep that you do. And the fact-finding section of that online manager training that I'll show you later, we'll go into that. Secondly, anyone who's playing at a high-level sports spends a lot of time practicing. Yes. So for those of you who don't know, which is probably 100% of you, I am a lover of pickleball. I play pickleball as much as I can. And typically when you play pickleball, people just don't spend time practicing. They don't spend time warming up. They don't spend time practicing dinking. They don't spend time practicing their third shot drops or doing drills. They go straight into playing, which is the opposite of professional pickleball players. They spend 80% of their time drilling and practicing, and then they spend, let's say, 20% of their time actually playing professional tournaments. Okay, so I say all this to say is that as there's nothing wrong with running with your HR professional or your manager or even a coworker not connected to that employee, running through the performance conversation so that it builds your confidence as a manager. That's going to help you deliver that performance conversation in a more confident way and in a way where it's mapped out and it's just better for everyone involved. I spoke about support before, human resources. Don't be afraid to reach out to HR. Don't be afraid to reach out to HR and to get guidance, to ask for assistance, and to ask for someone to bounce an idea off of, or to allow them to hear the conversation and hear you practice. Okay. If you have a good HR person, they will welcome the opportunity to witness you in action or to do a role play with you. That's what I hope. I hope that you have that in your organization. You have someone that will be a coach and a mentor for you when it comes to your employee relations. If not an HR person, hopefully you have a supervisor that operates in that capacity. So another piece of being responsive is that you need to begin documenting, right? So just a little caveat here in terms of there needs to be consistency with how you respond to your employees. Now, one thing that's helpful and one thing that is available at my organization that we have is an online progressive discipline system managed online training. So it's important for organizations to have a consistent approach to how they deal with their employees, having a uniform language that an organization uses when it comes to discipline. So I'll give you a quick sample of the course that I have here. Give me a sec. Okay. So here is my online course, the online manager training. And here are the different modules that we have. The introduction, the introduction. I go over an intro to the course, our mission, my background, disclaimer, how to use this system. And then after that, I go into a section that's called informal interventions. I go over how to appropriately give praise, how to do something called a feedback for improvement session. Then I go into the more formal interventions. Let me just jump back to the introduction, because one thing that's offered in this online course, by the way, it's all video tutorials. They're great, facilitated by myself. One thing that you'll see here in the attachments, you'll get a progressive discipline system manager guide, which is a PDF. You get all of the progressive discipline templates as Microsoft Word documents, so they could be customized to your organization. You also get to put this progressive discipline system in action. And we have scenarios that I will run through with you online. And then I give you the recommended interventions based on each scenario. Okay. In terms of formal interventions, there's video tutorials on verbal reminders, written. I go into what is a performance improvement plan, which is known as a PIP. I go into crisis suspension, which takes the employee out of your location until a thorough investigation can be done. This is not really known as a part of progressive discipline because it's not really seen as a punishment or discipline. It's seen as a way of protecting the organization and its employees by having an employee go off site. And then I go into termination. I go into what I call the fact-finding process, managing your emotions, making no assumptions, expectations and communication, obstacles. And then there's a piece that I speak about in terms of stopping sending emails. This is one of my biggest pet peeves, absolutely drives me crazy. Okay. Then we go into case studies and bios. I mentioned that we have scenarios coming up. Here we have an employer profile, the employee in crisis, the CEO, CFO, accounts payable coordinator. And then you have the scenarios that we actually run through, in which you'll have the opportunity to give your feedback on what should be done. And then you see if your feedback aligns with my feedback. Okay. So this course is offered online. Very convenient. You have access to this for a year. For anyone who has questions about this or needs a consultation, you can feel free to reach out. I have the link to set up a consultation with myself. I also offer group discounts, a nonprofit rate, small business rate. So I believe it's a great course. Not many people are offering a course like this and giving you all the materials that's included. So for me, this is pretty big, and it's pretty affordable. Okay. So progress notes and tracking. Every manager needs to be doing a level of progress notes on every employee, a log with your interactions to go over the informal interventions. And then once you have an employee on progressive discipline, the documentation in terms of like written reminders, that's one thing that you have on file. But every manager should be keeping a log of their employees. Godzilla. So I want to talk to you about Godzilla because I know so many times, I have told managers to do X, Y, and Z, and they do the opposite. They don't do it. And guess what? That baby monster turns into a Godzilla in your office, and you're in a very bad place when you have Godzilla destroying Tokyo. It's not a good sight. So I want to speak about destroying Godzilla. So when you have a Godzilla, now when I say Godzilla, I'm talking about you have an employee that you have not given feedback to. They've done a crap load of inappropriate things, and you're very upset. And it's time for them to go. Now, typically, when I have a manager that comes to me and says, I have a Godzilla, they don't call them Godzilla, but they have a situation where this performance issue has been happening for a long time. Maybe it's been a year, maybe it's been 3 months, maybe it's been 6 months. And they come to me and the manager says, Fred, I have to get rid of this person. We have to terminate them now. And then I go into, okay, show me your log. Show me what feedback you've given this person. And guess what? It's freaking crickets. That's not a good thing. No HR professional, no human resources director or an employee relations specialist wants to encounter that. You don't want to encounter that. So my feedback to you as managers is that when you're in this situation, you haven't done what you needed to do to kill this monster. First and foremost, you take ownership of what you have not done. Stop making excuses, okay? So typically a manager will say to me, oh, I've been so busy. This has been happening. That's been happening. And it doesn't help. It doesn't help the situation. Like I never say, oh yeah, you've had a lot on your plate. Yeah, don't worry about it. No, it doesn't freaking work like that. As a manager, you have to manage all of your responsibilities. And for some reason, in some organizations, managing people doesn't get a high level of priority as it should. And as HR, it's problematic because you have these bigger issues that come down the road. Okay. So there's a book, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a great book. There's a piece in there that speaks about asking for forgiveness and owning up to when you make a mistake. Typically, when you go to someone and you admit your mistake quickly, you take ownership, you discipline yourself more than what they can. So that means that once you've come to them and you've put it on their plate, you've communicated to HR, to your boss, that you dropped the ball on something. Typically, any kind of punishment or harshness might be lessened because you've brought that to their attention and it wasn't because they found out about this otherwise. So I want to encourage people to take ownership of not being a good manager, of not giving feedback, and acknowledging that you had in hand in creating this Godzilla. You had the opportunity to go to baby Godzilla's nest and kill him and smoke him. But instead of smoking him, you allowed him to wake up and run amok and eat your chickens and eat your livestock. And now he's, the size of the Empire State Building. It's not good. Also, when you have a situation and you're sharing with human resources what has occurred, it's important that you cooperate with human resources because they may ask you things like, go back into your emails. Excuse me. They may ask you, go back into your emails, give me this, give me that. I need evidence of X, Y, and Z to help build a case against an employee. Okay. Also, there's a book that I'm reading called The Man Code by Mark Henry. There's a chapter I just went over this morning, which is called Respecting Authority. As a manager, when you're meeting with human resources, assuming that you have someone who's competent, you have someone who's been in the field for 5, 10, 15, 20 years or longer, that you respect them and you understand that they might have some insight that you may not have on the situation. Many times managers want to deal with situations on their own. They don't want to use the resources that they have available, in their organizations. So if you have an HR department, consider yourself blessed. If you have a HR department with a very competent human resources director like myself, consider yourself even double blessed. Use that person, because the last thing that we want to do is help you kill Godzilla when it's a massive Godzilla monster. We want to be able to tackle Godzilla when he's a baby. Yeah, there's some level of energy and actions we have to do, but it's easier to kill monsters when they're babies rather than they're destroying Tokyo. So most people don't want to hear, I told you so, right? But oftentimes I am saying in my head to a lot of managers, I told you so, because they don't necessarily take heed or listen to the advice that we give as human resources. Now, we've been in so many situations that we can see things, 30 steps down, or 10 chess moves away. We know exactly how this is going to end up. And the role of HR is not necessarily to take employment actions. We are a lot of the times advisors to managers and CEOs. So it means sometimes that our feedback is not given priority, or it's just not taken. If that's the case, that's okay. Back in my social work days, I had a very good social work supervisor. He was a clinical social worker. And he told me this. He said, Fred, you are responsible for the process, not the outcome. So that's how most HR professionals see their role, as they are responsible for the process and not the outcome. Give me a sec. Pardon me. Now, there are consequences of inaction, which is the truth for any aspect of your life. If you don't take care of your health, you will get in some serious problems. Don't take care of your teeth. You don't take care of your body. You don't take care of your diet. There are consequences to that. The same holds true to employees in your organization and addressing Godzilla's, type issues. When Godzilla runs amok, morale is destroyed. People start to resign. You have customers and clients that don't want to be your customers and clients anymore. And potentially you have lawsuits. If, you have a Godzilla that is inappropriately commenting to women, to men, creating a hostile work environment, and you don't address it, you accept it, there are consequences. Now, sometimes these consequences don't come immediately. Sometimes it takes time for these consequences to manifest. It might not be right away. It might be months down the road. Either way, there are consequences to inaction. So I've made it my mission in my last 25, 28 years of working to serve as a resource for managers, to CEOs, and I'm here to help you. I'm here to assist. This is why I'm on YouTube now, to share my knowledge, share my expertise with everyone here. Okay. So if anyone needs to contact me, my email, you can reach out to me at mail@criticalconversationshr.com. Excuse me. You can reach me by phone. The phone number is 239-799-1180, extension 800. If you want to get a hold of me, I've included a link, which is information on getting a free consultation. If you want to chat with me, there's no commitment. There's no, you don't have to pay anything to see if there's a good fit between you and I, or myself and your organization. Also, for anyone interested, there's a link here in the chat where you can get more information on my online coaching, my progressive discipline manager coaching. It's a great system. I'm very proud of it. So I'm here if you need assistance. Also, if anyone's out there, they want to chat with me now, here's the link. You want to come up on the StreamYard, I'm here. So I want to thank everyone for being out there. Thank you for watching. I appreciate the viewership. I appreciate anyone who takes the time, whether you watched 5 minutes of this live cast or live stream or the entire, hour. I appreciate you. I thank you. I'm here as a resource. And if you like the content, you found value in it, subscribe to the channel. Share this video with other people. And if you want to reach out to me, I have links. You can feel free to reach out. And I'd love to have a conversation with you, learn about the issues that you're facing. So take care. God bless.